YouTube, what's up? Back again for another daily fishing video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Today we're going to break down day one of the Smith Lake Bassmaster Open. I just got back home from it. I'm getting ready to leave out to go to Grand, and I really wanted to do this breakdown video so you can see exactly what went down. You know, it's not just about the really good things that happened, catching bass, but it's also about bad decision making. And that's exactly what I was tainted with in this particular event. But you know, that's one thing. If you're new to this channel, this is what we talk about on this particular YouTube channel. We don't just talk about all the great things that happen and build myself up as I'm something bigger than life. I'm going to talk about some really terrible decisions that I made and some things that I would have done a little bit different had I had a second shot. We don't always have a second shot, obviously, guys. But if you're ever in this particular fishing situation, I hope you learn from this, and I think it will make you a better angler. But hey, real fast though, if you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel, all you gotta do is hit that sub button in the bottom right hand corner. It would really help me out if you did. But let's go ahead and dive right on into Smith Lake. You know, the thing about Smith this particular time, and actually it seems like most of the time I'm there, it's crazy, is we had to deal with some really adverse changing conditions. And namely, a lot of rain and the water rising. Over about a 24 to 36 hour time frame, we had the water rise about 2 feet. And it was right at the beginning of the tournament. So the water was coming up within the first couple of days right before the tournament. So it really changed everything. So if you'd been there for 5 or 6 days or something like that, everything you'd practiced was pretty much out the window. So that kind of made things a little bit more difficult, changed a lot of things. And if you didn't adapt well, you didn't do well in this tournament. And I actually think that's where some local advantage really played. You see guys like Jesse Wiggins doing well. Proznik's been there a ton, so I'm not surprised that he did well. And some other locals as well. But, you know, right out the gate, that's the first thing that changed. So when I think rising water, there's a couple things that you need to do with rising water. And that is, if you're catching fish on flat banks, go to steep banks. If you're, you know, it has a tendency to move everything around. You know, in this particular body of water, you know, the run-ins are a really big player. And they played in this event as well. Now, they weren't the #1 player. You know, there's still guys that caught them offshore doing some stuff. But for, you know, one of the biggest bags of the event, caught by Cody Bird, he caught him on some run-ins. So it's definitely a player. So that's the first thing we had to deal with. And the second thing we had to deal with is the first day, actually, and the second day of the event, we had a fog delay. The first day was quite a bit longer. I didn't even get to take off until about 9 o'clock. And so I was lucky enough that I had about a 4:40 check-in, so it didn't shorten my day too terribly much. But it definitely changed things because it kind of took out that early morning bite, and I was kind of hoping to capitalize on that. And it just didn't happen for me. So I kind of went to my offshore fish. Now, does that sound like a bad thing? No. But I should have made some adjustments. So I pull up to my first spot, and it's a spot that I really thought I was going to catch them. It had a big school of fish on it, and I thought I was going to wear them out. And I honestly didn't even think I was going to get on the spot, if I'm being completely honest. But I did get on the spot. I was the first one there, even at like boat 140-something, 150-something. They weren't there. I could live scope around, didn't see a fish in any direction, didn't even see bait or anything. I was like, oh, this isn't good. So I make a change, I go to my next spot, and literally my first cast out there, I catch a keeper. There's one.
Good on that.
Yeah, he's not bad. I've only got him on 6 pounds.
Oh, yeah. You gotta finesse him a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, just a little bit. I see some fish and everything, and I'm like, heck yeah, man, like this isn't too bad. And I was nervous to an extent about catching a limit because I knew it was going to just get tougher and tougher. And I didn't know what the rising water would do to these offshore open water fish, these herring chasing fish. I had no idea. Honestly, I hadn't dealt with that before. So that was a new condition for me. And so I pull up to that spot. I don't even see very much bait, but I see a few fish, catch that keeper. And then I hook what I believe is a striper. I never saw the fish, but I never turned this fish, and it was enormous. I mean, it got me down in some trees and broke me off about 50 foot down. But kind of fast forward, I start rolling to some stuff, and some stuff that I really thought I'd have a legit chance of catching a big bag off of, and just fish in general. What's crazy is I don't even see them. We're about to leave in just a second.
So you just had to feed her more. Hey, might be the one you was hunting. Looks like that. Look,
It looks pretty close, if not. He knocked fire out of it.
they ate it like he's hungry, huh?
Mm-hmm. Looks like for him to come here and get in the boat with me. He does keep these a lime burner, which I will take a lime burner. I take 4 more or 3 more lime burners too. Like real close. I don't think he's gonna make it. I think he's like 14 and a half. Yep, exactly, 14 and a half. Close. And it seemed like every time I make a move, I wasn't seeing the 2 things I needed. I couldn't see fish on live scope, and I didn't see bait. And those are 2 of the most important things when you're fishing herring. Herring eating fish is finding the bait, and then you find the bass. Well, I couldn't find either one. I ran about 10 places looking for bait, and before I knew it, it was like 11:30. Well, the last day of practice, I'd run way up the river, and I had a few places where I got bit on a square bill, and so that's what I went and did. I ran all the way up the river, or up the creek, and I started hitting my square bill stuff, but I started noticing it actually kind of threw me off a little bit, because everywhere I was catching them, the landmarks weren't the same, and it's because the water came up. I was fishing some pretty flat banks, and I didn't catch anything. Like, I never had a bite up that river, and it really threw me off a little bit. Actually, it threw me off a lot. I was like, oh my gosh, like, where the heck did these fish go? And I'll get to where I believe the fish went, but I'm gonna kind of follow through with this whole storyline here. So I run all the way up this creek, and this particular creek was Ryan Creek. It's all the way up this right arm to the very top end of it. And so at this point, I've got 1 fish still, and not doing too good. So I run all the way back down to the mouth of Brushy Creek, which, I mean, it's a pretty long haul. And I hit a few places along the way, don't catch anything. You don't see any more bait, and I'm like, you know what? I think I need to abandon this herring bite, because it's not happening for me. It's just not. And so I kind of start abandoning it. And I run to 1 more herring spot at the mouth of Brushy, and I catch another keeper. And I get a couple bites all on a rage swimmer, a 2.75 inch rage swimmer. And for whatever reason, they really liked the rage swimmer on day 1. I caught quite a few fish on it. I caught 2 of my keepers on it. My first keeper and this particular keeper. And they were both decent ones. I mean, they weren't big ones by any means, but I mean, when you're talking about not even getting keeper bites, that's kind of a big deal. Well, at this point, I run like 1 or 2 more little places, and I'm getting bites. Don't see them once again. And I'm like, you know what? I need to go run some brush piles. I need to just change what I'm doing completely and go do something different. So, I mean, it's like 2 o'clock, 2:30, I mean, it's late. I run up to my very first set of brush piles. I catch my biggest keeper of the day. It's like I don't know, a 2 1/4. I think it's around a 2 1/4 pounder. Todd Castledine actually pulled up to me while I'm fishing this brush pile, and I catch the fish in front of him. And because we were sitting there talking about how crappy the day was.
Alright, I'm running way up there because I got bit up there. This morning sucked though. I saw a wolf pack coming to me.
Yeah.
I was like 8. And I was like, oh, and I was ready. They didn't see me. I threw behind them. I was coming up to them. And one came from behind them and ate it. I'm like, alright, cool. I set them. They were all like 3 times. I set the hook.
No.
All of them scattered after I set the hook.
Dang it. Well.
I'm going way up there now.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's definitely the one you're looking for.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's a great one. You know, I catch number 3 and I still got plenty of time in my mind. I'm like, I just got to catch 2 more keepers. That's it. And my coin lure even catches like a 3 pounder off the point, but not on the brush pile. And I'm like, man, they might start to bite now. So this is the decision-making part that I made a big-time mistake. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, do I run up the Duncan Creek arm, run up Brushy a little bit further? I've got a bunch of docks up there with a bunch of brush piles on them. I shook off a lot of fish on these brush piles. I should go up there and fish these brush piles. But then, in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know what? I've got these 3 or 4 herring places in Rock Creek that are pretty legit. And maybe Rock Creek's firing when Ryan Creek wasn't firing. And that's a lot of times when you look at herring lakes, they have a tendency to do that. Like, you'll go into one creek and it's way, way better than the other creek, and you just don't know it until you really start sitting down on them and fishing them. So I'm like, all right, I just caught this 3rd keeper off a brush pile, right? You know, I'm sitting here saying, you know, I caught number 3. I got it figured out. What do? I go to Rock Creek and start chasing herring fish again.
You have to regroup and look back at it tomorrow. Because it ain't over yet.
No,
You know what I do? Fire up and you catch shit out of them in 20 minutes.
I mean, heck, if I just caught 2 more, there's one of them right
You
there.
go. See how easy that was?
Looks short, doesn't he? He's like, he got a big old head and no body. Yeah, he's short, isn't he?
Yeah. Long as he.
He's right where he's supposed to be. It's real easy to second guess everything and say, oh, you should have done this.
Okay.
That's a good one there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's cute. In here.
Oh, hook just fell out. I'm pretty sure that's a keeper. He's close.
I believe it, Mike.
He's long. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
It's silver?
Yep, 14 3/4. Like I can't even like make him touch. He's so dang close. And I pull back up on the place I caught a keeper and I catch like a short, and then I run to another spot, don't catch anything. I run up Rock Creek to these 2 schools, and there's a bunch of them there. I see a bunch of fish there, never catch a keeper. I mean, I'm catching like these the whole time. And at this point, I'm like, you just really screwed up. But at this point, I can't turn around and go back up Duncan Creek arm because, I'm almost out of time. I've got to be in like 40 minutes. And it's about a 15-minute run from where I'm at, so I've got like 30 minutes left, and I'm like, crap, I just screwed up. And so I run all the way back down to take off, and I go fish that one spot that I started on, nothing. I don't even see anything, don't catch anything. I go to another little arm where I'd had a few bites in practice, and I had a couple good schools swimming around eating herring. Nothing. And that was my day. Now, when I start talking about making mistakes and making adjustments, if you look at the course of a day, yes, you know, having between 7 hours, 9 hours, depending on how long your day is. And it sounds like a lot of time. But when you start thinking about how long you commit to certain, say, techniques or baits or areas of the lake, that time really starts ticking away. And it ticks and ticks and ticks to the point where you're like, okay, I've got to be a little bit better than what I'm being. I've got to make faster adjustments on the water. I actually believe I made a good adjustment going to the brush piles, getting away from the herring completely, going to those docks, skipping a jig, and throwing a shaky head and some things like that. I did not stay with it. For whatever reason, in the back of my mind, I let that creep back in on the herring stuff, and it screwed me up completely. Now, when I talk about what I should have done, what happens when the water comes up? What should you do if you're faced with that situation? Let's say, for instance, you're catching these fish on flat banks, you're throwing topwaters, whopper ploppers, buzz baits, things like that. And for whatever reason, the water comes up a foot or two and the fish vanish. And you're like, where the heck did these fish go? Did they go all the way up to the bank? Did they stay out there? Did they move up with the water or not? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But in my experience, especially in a rocky type reservoir like that, the number one thing fish do is they go to vertical structure. And what I mean by that is more bluffy type banks, steep drop off banks, big rock banks. And that's what those fish did. And I knew better. 100% knew better. A lot of the guys that caught them throwing topwater and things like that, caught them on those super steep banks. I did not make that adjustment. I let my practice dictate truly the outcome of my event, because of, in the back of my mind, I could always think about, well, there's this school, there's that school, and it wasn't happening. And guys, that is something I can't stress enough. If you pull up to your main stuff, you've got to know right off the bat, if it is not going down the way you know it should be going down, you need to change something up. Now, sometimes it's not as easy. Sometimes you got to make a massive bait change. Sometimes the fish have just readjusted and they're just not there. And you have to kind of dictate that based off of the condition. Did the water come up? Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? And you have to make that decision and that determination. But the faster you can make that decision and figure out exactly where the fish didn't or where they're not, the faster you can trust your gut and make the right decision. Once again, like a couple of tournaments this year, I did not trust my gut. I didn't make good decisions on day one. But, you know, that's why we had day two. And I made better decisions on day two. I'm going to tell you flat out, I made better decisions. Guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this breakdown of day one of the Bassmaster Open on Smith Lake. I did catch a few fish, rage swimmer, shaky head. But day two, I caught them on different stuff. I changed up. I knew I needed a big bag because I needed those points. And I had my opportunities, guys. That's all you can ask for when you're fishing tournaments, is having those opportunities. And I didn't capitalize on my opportunities on day two. But hey, y'all won't know that unless y'all watch it. And I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. And I'll see you on the next video.